If you want to be rich, do not start a startup. But if you want to be wealthy, this video might be for you. After almost 30 years of being a startup founder across 7 startups, 2 exits, and 5 major failures, catastrophic failures at times, I've learned some lessons about the difference between being rich and wealthy, and I'm going to share them with you. Take a look at these 2 books that are pretty popular in their own right. You'll have books like this, The $1 Million Weekend, which I've read, so you don't have to. And then you've got a book like this called The Millionaire Fastlane, which I recommend everybody to read because this has been one of the single most pivotal books that I've read that has helped me understand the lessons that I'm going to share with you in this video. Not to say there's anything wrong with these types of books. They're everywhere. You see them. You probably read them yourself. But I want to highlight some important lessons starting here because I don't think we talk about this enough as founders. As a chief strategy officer for startups.com, I see founders from all different walks of life come and start to share their dreams and desires in becoming a startup founder and making a successful startup. But here's my question to you. Of these individuals, these entrepreneurs, which one is rich and which one is wealthy? Who are the rich ones and who are wealthy? It's a great question. And you might be wondering, well, what's the difference? And I'm going to explain that to you. I would argue that some of them are rich, ultra rich, and some of them are ultra wealthy, and they don't necessarily go hand in hand. I wanted to tackle this topic because I see a lot of you out there, founders, come and approach me, and I listen to your stories, and I start to wonder about the motivations on why you're doing a startup. And it's important. As Simon Sinek always says, start with why. Now, I'm not judging your motivations at all. You have every right to become a founder and why you do what you do. But I want to challenge some of your thinking out there in the difference of what it means to become a founder in relation to being rich or wealthy. I think this is a worthy conversation, and I always want to be vulnerable and transparent with you and just share my journey because I think we can all learn together. But what's really important is that this is a disclaimer. It is my humble opinion only. I may say some things that rub you the wrong way or that you completely disagree with or might not be popular, but I think it's important for founders and advisors in my position to take a risk and go out and share what's on my mind and share the different ways that I like to look at this journey of being a startup founder. Because I've definitely learned there's a difference between rich and being wealthy. And here's how I'm going to define it. Now remember, you may be defining it a different way, but for the purpose of this discussion, let's talk about rich versus wealthy. When we're talking about rich, I'm talking about having loads of money. And that's going to be different for a lot of people, depending on where you live. Loads of money, having a lot of money means different things. But in general, if you want to be rich, you want to have lots of money. And I think that's fair. But now the difference comes in with wealth, and I believe that wealth equates to freedom. The wealthier you are, the more freedom you have. And once again, that's subjective, depending on who you are, what you need to live on, what your goals are. Having the freedom to do things with your wealth, that's going to be something that I think everybody needs to consider, especially if you're considering your long-term prospects in terms of your health, your fulfillment, success, what you want to do for your personal wellness, and how you see the vision for your life panning out as a startup founder. Going back to being rich to make money, well, that's going to equate to making as many dollars as possible. And the dollars framework is something you're going to see in books like this that want to teach you how to make as many dollars as possible in the shortest period of time. But on the other side of being wealthy and freedom, we need a framework that makes sense, or C.E.N.T.S. sense, as a penny versus a dollar. And that might be counterintuitive for a lot of people, but if you read books like this, like The Millionaire Fastlane, you're going to realize that making sense versus dollars makes more sense in terms of getting to that wealthy position where you have as much freedom as you want. I'm not endorsed or affiliated by either of these authors. I just want to take you on the journey to help you look at the frameworks that's going to help you on your journey. Let's look at getting rich. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to be rich, especially depending upon where you come from. I fully acknowledge that some founders have a better opportunity to get rich versus other founders. But again, this is all relative to where you are. Being rich on my side of the world is different than being rich in other parts of the world. And I've been in other countries where all the standards, all the measurements are really different. I've met some rich founders and I've had conversations with them, and it's been really interesting in learning their perspectives. But the one thing I've noticed is that certain principles stay true no matter where you're coming from and what rich means to you in terms of how much money you want to make. Let's look at this framework of making dollars. To make dollars, the first thing that you're going to need is drive. You must be driven Money must be the point. A lot of people say, yes, I want to be rich, but they don't have that drive and they're not interested in making money. They say they're rich because they actually want the freedom to pursue what they want, not to make money. You have to focus on making money. You have to be so driven, has to be in your blood. And that's what I think many people are missing. And that's the reason we start here. Next is you need the opportunity. More so, you need to be opportunistic. You might be in positions where you don't have as much opportunity as other people, but technology is evening the playing field. And if you're opportunistic, as they say, fortune favors the prepared mind, you are going to find those opportunities, become rich. You just have to be ready for them. After that, you want to be focusing on leverage. You can't get ultra rich. You can't get rich to the levels of what we see in popular media without being leveraged. And we're talking about leverage in terms of your time, your resources, leverage when it comes to risk. These are the all-in moments when you're pushing all the chips into the middle table and say, let's absolutely go for it. There are so many different ways to get leverage on your life in terms of your resources, but if you combine the drive and the opportunity, you will find them. The next quality I found is a focus on lifestyle. I find that individuals who are rich really enjoy their lifestyle, and I think that's okay. It's part of the motivation package to help you stay in the game and continue to work those long, toiling hours to make that money. Rich people also have the uncanny ability to focus on arbitrage. They buy low and they sell high. I have some really rich friends who basically go out to Costco, and if they see a special on toothpaste, they'll go buy a year's supply of toothpaste, sometimes 5 years supply of toothpaste, because there's arbitrage there. But if you're flipping houses or assets or just investing in the stock market, you're playing a game of arbitrage. And whether it's short-term arbitrage or long-term arbitrage, rich people know how to do that game and to make sure that they're making those margins and they're squeezing out and maximizing the ROI on every single dollar. To make dollars and get rich, you must also understand how important your reputation is. Your reputation opens up the networks to get access to those opportunities. Your reputation is based on how much drive you have, and you can actually leverage your reputation all the time by taking those risks and putting that reputation on the line to get a significant gain, maybe an arbitrage. But that's where lifestyle comes into play as well, because the lifestyle you live will also give you that reputation to help you make those dollars. You'll rub elbows with other rich people, and that's just part of the game. You may not like it, to which I say, hate the game but not the player. But if you want to become rich and make those dollars, well, you got to be thinking about your reputation at all times. And finally, rich people know how to drive for dollars short term. That's what this book, $1 Million Weekend, is all about. Spending one weekend to figure out how to become a millionaire. You're focused on short-term opportunities. They may not be sustainable opportunities, but if you can go in and make that bag, grab that cash short-term, well, then you're going to be better because you can sprint on the next one to make more dollars. Now, what's important is there are different scales of time depending on how you're going to get rich. If you're a startup founder, you have to expect to work hard for the next 5 years to prove that you've got something that's going to make you those ultimate dollars. Then you're going to spend another 5 years going for that exit. So that's a total of 10 years. Now, for some people, that's way too long. They want to get rich in just one weekend, such as this book, but they also think to themselves, well, there must be faster ways than a 10-year horizon. While other people say, I can get rich and I have a longer term horizon, such as becoming a real estate investor. That takes time. But you're going to see how it's different from generational wealth, which goes for generations. These are individuals who have long-term plans that go beyond just their lifetimes into their kids and their grandchildren, and that's how wealthy families are born. Now let's look at the other side of becoming wealthy. Like I said, being wealthy is about having the freedom, and that usually equates to time. The freedom to do things that we want to do. And this is what I pursue all the time. I will actually trade up being rich. I've turned down becoming rich these days. These are the lessons that I've learned. Now I'm older. I've got children. I've got a mortgage. I've got an amazing marriage. And so my values are different. And like I said, your values and my values might differ, and that's quite all right. But the first difference that you're going to see is that so many individuals who are rich, they may have a lot of money and they may be able to spend a lot of money, but they're beholden to the way they make money. They're beholden and they're trapped in kind of a hamster wheel where they have to just keep working. You think about individuals who are making so much money in the stock market, on Wall Street, or maybe they're in a high corporate executive job. CEO salaries are extremely high, and you could argue that they're getting rich, especially richer than the other normies like me who aren't making as high of a salary. But stop for a moment and look at their lives and figure out how much time that they have to do things the way that they want. Sure, they can buy the conveniences, and rich people will spend money to leverage their time or buy back their time so they can be more productive. But But all that extra time just goes into the very thing that's making them rich. It's the same thing with the startup founder that takes in a lot of investment money, raises a huge round. Now, you could argue that they're rich. The valuation of their stock is extremely high. And maybe they've got lots of money. Maybe they're pulling in good salary. Typically not, but they at least have that runway, and their startup is an embarrassment of riches. They're able to go spend on all those things that make them like Google and culture and sleep pods. Maybe that's your version of being rich. But those founders now have to work for those investors, and they don't have the same freedom that everybody else would. Anybody who's just running a small business, not the same freedom. And this is where you want to start thinking about the difference between rich and wealth, especially if you are trying to build a startup to get rich and you're taking in that VC money, or you think that's your path to having all the money that you ever want to make those dollars. You want becoming wealthy to make sense. And that's the perspective, the framework that comes from the Millionaire Fastlane. And like I said, this changed my perspective on everything. There were many times that I had as much money as I wanted in that moment, but I wasn't really wealthy until I read this book and things started to make sense. I focused on cents versus dollars. And here's what it looks like. First is control. As the book argues, whatever venture you get into, you want the majority of control. But unfortunately, you can lose that control if you take on investors. Even if they are minority shareholders on your cap table, they can have operating agreements locking you up and you start to lose control. And that doesn't make sense. Other areas where you lose control is if you make unwise decisions with co-founders and splitting equity. Not to say having all that control is the best way to build a co-founder relationship and a team, but I'm saying that if you lose control, well, it might not make sense for you and you might miss out on becoming wealthy. After that is entry. Smart individuals who build wealth understand they want to enter into the market where there is a high barrier of entry. They're doing something where there's not a lot of competition. If you're finding a startup opportunity and everybody can do it, I'm thinking about, opening a Shopify store, becoming a creator or an influencer, or doing Fulfilled by Amazon, any of these popular ideas that often come from books like this. If so many people can have access to it and do it, and the barrier of entry is low, it's going to be much more difficult for you to build that wealth. After that, these individuals focus on needs. They want to chase needs versus chasing the dollars. That's one principle that I learned. Chase needs, not the money. Go and solve painful problems, even if they're boring, especially for other wealthy people, because they will spend their money with you to have their problems go away. And the greater the need, the more painful the need, the easier it is for you to go and generate that wealth. A lot of times founders get confused with this. They focus on what they think they need or what they think the user needs, their customers, and they're really not addressing the heartfelt needs, the painful needs. That's when founders start to hack away and create a solution that nobody cares about because they don't need it. And so the smart founders, the ones who can build wealth, go and validate the need before they start building. And this is something I repeat on my channel over and over again like a broken record. T stands for time, and this is where I had my perspective absolutely blown away. Wealthy individuals know how to divest themselves and the money that they're making from time spent. When you're trading dollars for hours, if you constantly have to be doing something to make that money, then you are shackled by time. You're not going to break out because you only have a finite amount of time, and wealthy individuals know that time is the most valuable resource possible. And that's why I buy back my time. I buy back my time so I can generate the wealth and have the freedom to work on what I want. And that's not necessarily equated to how much money I'm making. The dollars that I make, it just needs to make sense to me. Smart startup founders know how to hire the right people, put in systems so they can multiply their time. The founders that aren't going to make it, that constantly stay on the treadmill, they think to themselves, well, I have to be doing everything. I have to be generating the revenue. It all relies on me. And there's some ego that comes into it. But the wealthy founders, the ones who are going to become wealthy, they understand I need to get exponential with my time. And finally, this is a word that all founders understand is scale. Eventually, you need to build a venture that can scale into billions of dollars. That's the market that you want to go for. Everybody is going to need it. And so many founders make this mistake of picking a problem and creating a solution for a very small marketplace. And that is all right. If you want to just build enough wealth to have your own freedom, build that unicorn, YO unicorn, a unicorn that works for you, not for an investor, then pick a smaller market. But individuals who want to play the venture capital game, they have to get to scale. But at the same time, scale is relative. And I keep talking about how it's subjective to you. Being rich is subjective to you. Being wealthy is subjective to you. Nobody should ever tell you exactly how much wealth or how much money that you need to have to achieve the freedom that you're looking for. So scale to the level that you want to scale. Now, if you're interested, well, you can pick up this book. I know I keep sounding like I'm promoting it, but you want things to make sense to you and you alone first. Whenever I look at a venture, whenever I'm making a decision, when it comes to my career and my personal goals, my value system, I think to myself, all right, do I have control? How much control? How much am I willing to give up certain amounts of control based upon the upside, the rewards of this? Do I have a proper entry? Is the barrier of entry high where I've got less competition? Or is it so low that everybody wants to do it? It sounds easy, therefore it's too good to be true. I think, am I solving a painful need enough where people are going to change their behaviors and spend money with me? Then right from day one, even though I may have to invest the majority of my time, I think to myself, what are the systems that are going to get me to the point where I can free myself, I can divest myself from the time needed to generate that revenue? And finally, is it going to scale enough? Is there enough scale for upside for me to achieve the wealth goal that I'm looking for? And not only am I super realistic about this with myself, but also with my co-founders and my investors. But let's look at what this actually means when you're doing a startup. And I'm going to introduce another acronym. But first and foremost, a startup is, to me, the riskiest path to becoming wealthy. This is not just based upon my opinion. It is based upon my life and spending the past few years advising so many other founders through startups.com, through my investing activities, becoming a general partner for startup funds, raising over $100 million from my startups and other people's startups. I not only have the receipts, I have the anecdotes and the evidence by talking to other people who've been there, done that, and these are the lessons that they've shared with me. These are universal principles that I want you to consider as you are contemplating the difference between becoming rich or wealthy through a startup. Well, the startup is going to offer different opportunities, but it also imposes a specific dynamic that you must consider to achieve whatever type of success that you're looking for as a founder. Let's break it down here. No surprise, we're going to start off with scale. I've already talked about scale. Make sure that if you want to build a unicorn company, you need to have a unicorn type market. Next is tech. If you're building something, you have to use tech to innovate so you can achieve that scale. You can disrupt all the other buzzwords that we're talking about. I'm not saying you need to go get a computer science degree or become a CTO, but whether you want to achieve being rich or wealth, you must use tech to get you there. You must be agile. You have to be so flexible, relentlessly resourceful, and be able to pivot, especially now when AI is changing everything like every 2 weeks. If you're not agile mentally, emotionally, you're not agile technically, you're not agile with all your skill sets, and you're not developing what is necessary to iterate constantly or to pivot when necessary, you're not going to get there. And it goes without saying, there is a lot of risk. Your risk tolerance must be high. There's no other industry where we actually say, you know what, a 90% failure rate is acceptable. In fact, if you're trying to build a unicorn, 97% of startups are going to fail. They're never going to become unicorns. And these are the ones that get funded. There's so many other startups that never get funded in the first place. So your risk tolerance must be high. And so many founders don't consider this. When the risk starts to increase, founders start to feel that pressure and they start to cave and the performance goes down. And that's not going to help you. Startups are a team sport. It is not a solo sport. Eventually, you have to learn how to build a team. This means you're not only going to be a leader, but eventually you must become a manager. You must understand systems and how to manage teams and to scale teams, to build culture. These are all things that you're going to learn along the way. But I'll just be straightforward with you. So many founders I meet, they are terrible at building teams. They don't know how to work with teams. They're going to be solo founders forever, and that's not going to get you to being rich or wealthy. Next is you must be unreasonable. And this is where reputation can kind of go out the window because you're living in the future. You have to be completely convicted of what you're trying to build and being agreeable with everyone and all their opinions. Like an investor comes to you and says, I don't think that's going to work. And you say, oh, okay, I'll change it based on your opinion. That's not going to cut it if you want to become rich or wealthy doing startups. I know so many founders that had a thesis and they put it out there and everybody laughed at them and said, that's a dumb idea. And they said, okay, hold my beer. I'm going to prove it to you. So many founders have a chip on their shoulder and others look at them and say, that's unreasonable. You're being an unreasonable person. But whether they think it's being stubborn or not, you don't want to be obstinate. You want to be flexible. Remember, agility is all part of it, but you must be unreasonable. There are things that you will do, decisions that you will make that seem completely beyond reason. And that's okay. Stay in there. Have the courage to do so as a founder. Lastly, you have to be able to pitch. And I spend a lot of time on this channel teaching you how to pitch. And it's so important. It's not just pitching for investors, it's pitching for sales, pitching for co-founders, teams, bringing employees on board. Maybe you have to poach an employee. You have to pitch. Great founders, especially if you're not technical, know how to recruit technical founders. And that's constantly pitching. You'll be pitching. In other words, you'll be selling all the time. As soon as you take that first VC check-in, you are constantly pitching. You're raising funds for the rest of the life of your startup. Learn how to pitch, especially if you want to take the path to becoming wealthy. Every wealthy individual that I ever met has been a consummate salesperson. Not only are they absolutely good at building things, they know how to sell it at the same time. So learn how to pitch, and that's what we're here for on this channel. There is something about startup founders where they cannot not do a startup. And I say absolutely go for it. It's in my blood, it's in your blood, that's why we're here. But the point of this video is to think about your motivations. Are you trying to become rich or are you trying to be wealthy? And I always advocate for the path of wealth. Look for that wealth and build a startup in a way that doesn't necessarily make you absolutely gouty rich, because I think that's something that comes with hustle culture and all the things that we see, depending on where you're coming from, that can kind of blind us from all the principles that we see here in building a startup. Ensure that the way you're building startups makes sense to you. C.E.N.T.S. That's the pathway that I recommend based on my experience. Hope this discussion has been helpful. Love to hear your comments. Do the YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you're thinking if you want more videos like this. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you in the next video.